Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Autogefühl. Today with me AJ and Michelle. You join me on a beautiful day here in Mallorca, and next to me is the facelift Porsche Macan. Well, what's different now for 2018? There's a new engine, there's new chassis, and there's a lot more assistance systems. But is it really any better? I'm here today to find out. Are you ready? Come on, let's go! With the advent of the SUV craze in the market, it was only time before SUVs stopped being only about off-road capability and started becoming more about luxury, comfort, and even sporty dynamics. Of course, you had cars like the Range Rover, but sports car companies like Porsche, for example, also jumped on the bandwagon with the Cayenne. But now, it's not only them. Bentley, Lamborghini, Jaguar, Aston Martin, Rolls-Royce, Alfa Romeo, Maserati, they're all making SUVs. Even Ferrari is coming out with one. So it's no surprise then that the Macan is one of the most popular models for Porsche. Since 2014, they have sold over 350,000 units. So, what's different? Doesn't look that much different to me either, but the front facade is now redesigned. There are no more fog lamps on the front bumper. Instead, that space is now occupied with these more vertical aerodynamic fins. The headlights, by the way, now come with LED as standard, with those 4-dot quadrangle type daytime running lights. The fog lamp is now going to be replaced with some more LED strips in the bottom, which are going to produce the same effect overall. I think in the end it's a little bit more evolutionary in terms of design and not revolutionary. The next generation Macan will only be out after 2020, so this is just a mid-cycle refresh. So while the car looks very similar, there's some small things that they have continuously changed, and it's not just the appearance, but also things like the chassis has been upgraded ever so slightly. For example, the linkages in the front suspension are no longer steel, but are made of aluminum now to save that little bit of weight. The brake pedal arm has also been reduced in length so that you have a sharper throttle response. And of course, there's a brand new 3-liter twin-scroll turbo petrol engine V6, which I'll talk about later on. But on the side as well, you get two new wheel designs. They start with either 20 or 21 inches. Here we have the Pirelli tires P0 with a 21-inch wheel. Going further down, you also have these blades on the side, just to give that little bit of contrast. If you watch the premiere video with Brian, he does talk about this car looking a little bit more like an iPhone, and I agree. There's a lot more smoother edges. There's not many sharp lines anymore, but I like that. It works well. Just the subtle haunch and these curves, which give you that little bit of play between light and shadow, dark and bright, as well as just kind of mirroring the ground a little bit. I think it has a very elegant design. The car is still 4.69 meters long, it's still 1.9 meters wide. As standard, you get regular suspension coilovers. You can also get adaptive electronic damping, which is adjustable continuously. And you can also get the air suspension that we have on this car, which can raise the car in the off-road mode and also lower it, and then has an active stability management program as well. There are also some new colors for the Porsche Macan, but one major change that you will notice now immediately is this. The tail lights now go horizontally across the middle of the trunk. This is very similar to the rest of the Porsche design DNA. You see this on the Panamera, on the new Cayenne, even the new 911. I like it. It's very three-dimensional, very sculpted, so it gives that extra depth and personality. And again, like what Brian said with the whole iPhone thing, Very smooth, very clean. I mean, there isn't even a button to release the hatch. You have to use this button over here. Coming down further, a nice diffuser, quad tailpipes, which are actual tailpipes, not cosmetic, not just facades. They are actual extensions. And I really like the whole design. The trunk, by the way, is 500 liters. With the seats down, it goes up to 1,500 liters. Very nice and flat loading area. A little bit of a loading lip, but nice scuff plates to protect your bumper. I also like these little touches, like look at this. They did not need to spend, I bet that cost 20,000 euros to engineer and design and put it into tooling and production, but I like that. I like that attention to detail, and I expect this from companies like Porsche. Power outlet over here, some tabs to anchor things down, place to put away your first aid kit. Since this has the optional air suspension, you can raise and lower this to make it easier to load items in. Some more storage compartments. This has the Bose sound system, so here we have some the subwoofer for that. Of course, you can also have a tire puncture kit or a space saver or a spare wheel there. But one thing I do not like, and I see as a glaring omission, are buttons to fold the seats down. And this is something that I think at this price point for a Porsche, I shouldn't have to go all the way to the side and use the tab over here to fold the seats down. But anyway, as you can see, it folds in a 40, 20, so the ski hatch, and another 40. And with this, you get a very nice flat loading bay as well. Porsche, please put switches in the back. Here we have the key fob, a nice Porsche badge, and the fob itself is in the shape of, I'm going to say it's a Panamera. What do you guys think? The back is a bit too long to be a 911, but one thing's certain, it certainly doesn't look like a Macan. But anyway, let's open the door. Opens really wide. It's a very tall door. Of course, this is one of the plus points of an SUV. This is why people like it. Nice plush exterior for the window frame. Very solid feeling door, although there's quite a lot of hard materials all around here, but I still think it still feels of higher quality, though it's not necessarily soft. The door handle and the armrest itself is pretty plush, so that's nice. I also like this checkered element here, along with this strip of metal finish inlay. Windows, mirrors, memory for the seat. Speaking of the seats, the base seat in the standard Macan comes with fabric, but here you see the animal skin leather sports seat. Down here you see the various adjustments for the seat. I mean, you can move it back and forth, tilt it up and down, raise it, the reclining of the back. You can also extend the under thigh support. You can tighten the side bolstering for the base. You can tighten the side bolstering for the back. You can position vertically the lumbar support and also the lateral extension of that as well. So plenty of options to confuse you, but also to help you find the right seating position. And once you do, you can just save it with this memory button. Nice step to help you get inside. Sorry for making this car so dirty. My shoes are really dirty as well. But hey, it's an SUV, right? It should be okay with the dirt. Key goes in here next to the headlight cluster. I'm not going to turn it on just yet, but let's take a look at the cockpit. Wow. First impression is, hey, wait a minute, am I sitting in a 911? That's because the Macan now comes with the optional GT steering wheel straight out of the 911, so it does feel like a sports car and not really a sports crossover. I also like how Porsche always retains the classic driver-focused sporty instrument cluster, so you still have a analog tachometer in the middle and an analog speedometer on the left. Of course, they have digital readouts, and the right section is the only one which is reserved for a full digital display. So here you also have the optional Sport Chrono package. You can see a lot of things like how much of power distribution each axle is getting in terms of the all-wheel drive. Whole host of different things we will check out in a little bit later. But of course, with the Sports Chrono package, you also get the sports selector, the driving mode selector over here, and the super cool Sport Response button, which is Porsche's little party trick. You push this, the car just makes itself rigid, it primes the turbocharger, and then this gives you up to 20 seconds of ultimate performance at a time. You can use it as much as you want. I also like the discreetly hidden away steering wheel heater button, which is back here. This is the stock for the cruise control. Of course, paddle shifters for the 7-speed PDK gearbox. Wipers. I also like you can also have, for example, I just realized you can have Google Maps on your navigation screen extended right over here. Really cool. A lot to talk about, a lot of new things, a lot of buttons. So hop inside and let's take a closer look. Let's talk about the dashboard. I also like the materials on the top. This is pretty plush. Feels really rigid, really well built, doesn't squeak. The dashboard is not that deep, so the A-pillars are not that far away, which means when you're driving quickly and you're rolling around, you can see out the sides really well. Sport Chrono package, of course, means you have a clock on the top with an analog timer, which is just so cool. Down here, this is the new element. That is the first recognizable thing you can see as a change. There's the new 10.9-inch touchscreen. This is optional. There's a smaller one which comes as standard. And because it's up here, now the AC vents have been pushed down here. So a little bit new design as well. Optionally, you also get the ionizer, which makes which filters the air really well on the inside. And I think that's something cool to have. It has an anti-allergen filter and coating as well. A lot of talk about this. Touchscreen is really cool. There's a lot of apps that you can synchronize with this. You can connect it with your Android or Apple smartphone. There's also constant LTE connection. So this car has a SIM card, which means that it's actually a swarm mine. So there's a central Hive server. So all the different cars in this network are communicating with each other in terms of if one car approaches an area with an accident, it will notify that to all the other cars in the server, and then that information will be updated in the navigation. So if you're going around that area, the car will automatically divert you to another area as well. So not only have they done a lot of new things in terms of the engine and the chassis and the driving, but technology is another area where they have spent some time. In this regard, there's also a lot of new assistance systems. For example, you also get things like traffic jam assist, so between 0 and 65 kilometers an hour, in conjunction with the adaptive cruise control, and now the lane keeping assist. So it can start and stop the engine, set off from zeros, from a standstill, maintain the safe distance for the car in the front, and also with steering intervention, keep you in line. So if you're stuck in a traffic jam, essentially, theoretically, you can be on your phone, or you can be working, or you can be talking, and let the car do its own thing, which is pretty cool. There's also, I think it's a little bit late to the game, but there's also an emergency city braking function. I also like the responsiveness of the touchscreen, really cool. You can see here we're in Mallorca, beautiful island. Can't wait to go down to the beach. And yeah, traffic updates, again with the connection. A lot of different settings as well. For those of you complaining that all the new cars are just touchscreen and there's no buttons, well, Porsche has got you covered. There's nothing you can really complain about. I mean, there's hotkey buttons all over here for the volume, for other functions like, for example, to scroll through these options, or if you're in the navigation screen, where's the navigation? There we go. You can use this to zoom in and out, for example. Hotkey buttons. I also like the soft rubber finish on the AC vents. I like that. So many buttons over here. Hazard lights, hill descent control, air conditioning, defoggers, temperature for the driver, temperature for the passenger with the little display, the vent controls over here, seat heater buttons, traction control, lane keeping assist, exhaust, auto shut off, With the air suspension, you also get buttons like this to lower the car. You also have the sports suspension set up, so you can, irrespective of the driving mode that you're in, you can always change this suspension. And an off-road mode, which will lift the car, deactivate the engine auto shut-off, and maintain the first gear, for example, for a longer time to ensure that you have good tractability. So a lot of buttons, even up here. Michelle, if you look up, I mean, there's a lot of buttons over here. And these are all dummies, thankfully, so it depends on what options you get. But for right now, you just have, for example, the parking sensor and for the lights. By the way, this car also has a new 3D augmented top-down view. So there will be 4 cameras. You can get that optionally. We don't have that in ours, so you would have a camera in the front, 2 cameras below the wing mirrors, and a camera in the back, which will then render an augmented top-down view, which I really like. And let's see if I can show you the reversing camera in this car. So if I put it in reverse, you can see that it's got dynamic guidelines, front and rear parking sensors as well. But apart from that, electronic parking brake, cigarette lighter, beverage holders, and a center armrest to charge your phone, and a inductive charger over here. You can see that there's already a phone down there. Some more USB chargers, SIM card slots, SD card slots, you name it, this car has it. Let's just check the glove box while we're at it. Damped, felt lined, fairly decent in size. You can keep your bottles. It's got a cooler, and yeah, I like this. I like the new design. Do you guys too? Let's hop into the back seat. Door opens fairly wide, although I think the opening is not that big. Trying not to get the car too dirty, but yeah, the rear wheel arch also kind of impedes in your space to get inside. But once inside, it's not that bad. I'm 5'8", or about 1.7 meters. This seat is set to my driving position, and knee room is adequate. Headroom is ample. I can slide my feet under the front seat. If they raise it a little bit, I would have some more space, because right now it's kind of getting a little bit pinched. But again, this is based on the VW Group siblings Audi Q5 platform, so it's not necessary. It's a mid-size SUV. It's not a large-size SUV, but I'm going to say that this feels like it's a little bit bigger than the BMW X3, because if you watch my reviews of that car, I did notice that the rear seat seemed a bit too cramped for a car of its size. That's simply because of the long front bonnet and just a little bit smaller cabin. This is a little bit more bulbous, I would say, perhaps. You know what I mean? It's got more proportion. The cabin is a little bit longer, so that does translate into more space back here and pretty decent boot as well. On the plus side, I have my own climate zone. Again, this would be optional if you want a third climate zone in the rear. 2 AC vents, and I can shut them off if I want. Also a couple USB ports to charge my phone. There are no pockets in the back, but I don't really mind that because I have door pockets. An armrest with some cup holders, which I can also fold down as a ski hatch if I want to, and ISOFIX points for child seats on the outer 2 seats. Ooh, Porsche. I really like this 3D emblem. Feels really nice, looks high quality. I also like the hood. I like that there are cutouts for the headlights, and it really does wrap around all the way to the edge, kind of like the Mini Cooper. Anyway, let's talk engines. So what you see here is the new 3-liter V6 petrol engine for the Macan S, which makes 354 horsepower. It has a central twin scroll turbo. If I can just remove this little plastic piece, you can see that here. So it's a really new design. It's really interesting. Kind of what the AMG biturbo, inside biturbo engine kind of does. So you see this is the turbocharger here. It's a twin scroll turbo. You can't really make that out by looking at it. But what you can make out by looking is that the headers of the cylinder banks also has the exhaust manifold built in. So what that means is, first of all, the turbocharger is within the V of the engine. The distance that the exhaust gases have to travel to the turbocharger is very narrow, and because the exhaust manifold is built into the header, it also means that the cooling system can be built in and integrated. So you have cold, dense, high pressure exhaust gases traveling a short distance to a twin scroll turbo. What does that all mean? That means that you get great responses at low RPMs and high RPMs. Apart from this, there is also a reworked 2-liter petrol engine for the regular standard Macan. This makes 245 horsepower in Germany, actually, because in Europe it needs to have the particulate filter. Outside, where that's not a requirement, it makes a little bit more horsepower, 252 actually. There's also going to be a Macan Turbo, which has I think around 440 horsepower. This comes mated with the Porsche dual clutch transmission, the PDK. It goes through also a all-wheel drive system. Let's talk a little bit about that. It's called the Porsche Traction Management, but you can also get it with the Plus variant. You get it with a torque vectoring electromechanical differential. The four-wheel drive is actuated by a multi-plate clutch. So as the power goes through the dual clutch transmission, through the transmission gears, there's a linkage which drops down with the multi-plate clutch, which goes back forward to the front axle. This clutch can engage and disengage, and that way it can vary torque to the front axle if needed. So all of this is really interesting, but what I'm interested to find out is how does it compare to, for example, the BMW X3 M40i, which I drove, and I really liked the 6-cylinder inline petrol engine in that car. That also had a twin scroll engine. Really beautiful engine. I complimented that quite a lot. And similarly, the AMG GLC 43. Although I didn't drive the 43, I did drive the 63S actually. But how did these cars compare, and will I like this more than the X3? Let's go find out. Well, this is an SUV, and while it might not be as capable off-road as some of its true 4x4 competitors, it should still be able to do a little bit of off-roading. Of course, I don't have the opportunity now to really take it off-road. I did park the car in some, some field which was a little bit soft in the ground, and it was able to get there with no problem. But let's just talk about at least the hardware that the car has in order to help it off-road. First of all, this car comes equipped with the optional air suspension. So with that, when I push the off-road mode on the control button here, the whole car lifts itself up off the ground even higher, so you get more ground clearance. This air suspension also becomes really rigid to maintain that ground clearance as you go over rough obstacles. The engine auto shut-off is disabled, so the engine is always on. It holds first gear for as long as it can so that it's not trying to shift up when I'm crossing some rocks or going up a really steep hill. And things like this which help maintain a more easier off-road capability. The throttle response is also a little bit dull, and with that I wouldn't slip the wheels as easily. And I'm just going on an off-road track right now, so this is really not what this car, this is not a challenge for any car whatsoever, but in the promo videos they did show some kids going on the sand with their surfing boards and things like that, and perhaps that's as much as it is designed to handle. It is a bit bumpy because of that rigid suspension setup. The tires are also not really off-road tires at all, so if you need to go out, if you're towing like your boat or you're towing something like that and you need to go on a dirt track or in the sand for a little bit, then yes. If you plan to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, then of course not. But what's more important than off-road mode is the sport mode. So since I am on a small little driveway here, let's go to sport mode. Now the car is lowering itself down. I can feel it, I can see it going down. This provides a lower center of gravity. The throttle response is sharpened. The exhaust is already in the loud mode. The engine feels a lot more open, a lot more free, breathes a lot better, sounds a lot better. Steering is also a lot heavier. It's really nice and direct as well. I really like the sport steering wheel. really makes you feel like you're driving a 911. You can get really comfortable, of course. The steering wheel can also be adjusted for reach and rake automatically. Let's go left. Again, visibility is really good. I have these high walls around me, but because it's an SUV, I'm sitting higher, I'm sitting upright. So that way it's a lot more easy to handle narrow roads such as this. Visibility generally is also really nice. At slow speeds you have good visibility out the sides. The mirrors as well are really large, so gives you good view. I'm in a very narrow street, so I can't really push it, but already I can tell you that V6 sounds really nice. They've done a lot of things apart from the engine being brand new, also in terms of suspension. The linkages, for example, in the front axle are now made of aluminium, so the weight is a lot less. The unsprung mass is also decreased. The suspension geometry has also been tweaked a little bit. Every little piece has been kind of, reanalyzed to see how they can improve that little by little. So it's an evolutionary, gradual, incremental development. Really narrow roads, really beautiful nevertheless. As well as that, the air suspension also has an active stability program. So with this, when you're going around corners, for example, it will push out on the outside wheels and give it some slack on the inside wheels. And that way, when you're going around really twisty roads, the car tends to stay a little bit flatter than otherwise. Let's give it a little bit of gas. Brake response is also really good. And that's also thanks in part to a little bit of a revision in the brake pedal. The linkage is also a lot shorter to the master cylinder, so you have a much more immediate response. The brakes have also become a little bit bigger, a little bit more upgraded. You can, of course, get ceramic brakes as options and things like that. There's so many different things you can keep piling on top of this car. You can really make it really expensive if you're not too careful. But at the same time, somehow it doesn't feel aggressive. I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing. I'm noticing that some cars, or some SUVs rather, don't feel as composed on the road. They feel a little bit, lumbering and floaty, but this feels more car-like, feels more easy if anything else. All right, now we're getting onto some more open road, so let's test some high-speed mannerisms out on this nice country lane here in Mallorca. So, keeping it in sport mode, throttle response is, again, really good in the sport mode. I can even go to Sport Plus mode, and here this car just becomes so much more tighter. It does really feel very car-like, and that's something that Porsche has tried to capture even more with this facelift of the Macan. Steering is really, really great. We're going to take it out on some more nice twisty winding roads to really test it. But on this kind of a straight road, actually it's probably better to keep it in normal mode. And actually now the car becomes really quiet. The engine is in its quieter mode in terms of the exhaust. It revs a lot more smoothly. It doesn't have a very sharp throttle response. The PDK shifts up as quickly as it can. Like right now, I'm barely going over 70 and it's already in 7th gear. And in this way, it kind of calms down, changes its personality. The steering also feels a little bit softer. But at no point have I ever felt that the steering is, becoming less precise. Like I find a lot of electromechanical steering systems in comfort mode, it just becomes numb. And that's not a good thing. Comfort doesn't mean it has to be numb, it just has to be lighter, I guess. But here it's still very precise, gives me a lot of feedback. It's just a little bit lighter and easier to turn. I like that. Apart from that, there's also a lot of assistance systems. You get adaptive cruise control. You can get that optionally also with the traffic jam assist. So in conjunction with the radar control, which will maintain the distance with the car in front, and the lane keeping assist, which will, of course, keep the car in the lane with steering intervention. From 0 to 65 kilometers an hour, you can just let the car do its own thing. It will follow the car in front if it's slowing down, it can even come to a complete stop and set off again thanks to this stop and go function. And it can make small steering inputs, and at those low speeds in traffic, it can pretty much drive autonomously. But this is not something grand or special. I mean, we've seen this in cars like the Seat Leon as well. So it's good to have this, but I don't think it's such a revolutionary new technology. But there are some definitely good new additions like emergency CD braking, also the ionizer for the climate control. So incremental changes, I think that's the name of the game. That's their plan so far with this new facelift Macan. Just incremental changes. Very sunny. One thing I noticed about the visor, by the way, there are no lights for the vanity mirrors, which I don't know why. Maybe it's an option, but why would you put it an option? It should just come as standard. Some small things like this, as well as the the folding of the rear seats from the trunk. These things I would have liked to come as standard, or these are, I would say, basic things that a modern car should have. I can also feel that this car is coasting right now, so that's another new improvement with this engine. With the PDK, it can coast. With the auto shut off in conjunction, actually, if it knows that you're coming to a stop, it will coast and turn the engine off as you come to the red traffic light. And with that and the auto shut off, and just overall better engine management systems, including variable valve timing and lift for the input valves and the exhaust valves, the car is supposed to be a little bit more efficient, also because it's a little bit more lighter. And we'll put that to the test later on. Right now it's giving me a really high consumption, so yeah, I think it's too early to gauge that. But I will reset this and then I will come back to you in a little bit of time. So yes, definitely the new Macan with the facelift and the new assistance systems and the new technology, it's more comfortable, it's more refined, it's really quiet, and it's a little bit more fuel efficient. Finally, got out of the city, which, by the way, the Macan fits right in. It feels a little bit larger than it really is, so it takes some time to get used to, but once you do, maneuvering around is not that much of a problem. The steering is light as well, and I did notice that it did feel like the turning circle was a little bit larger, but again, something you'll get used to. Anyway, now let's put it through its paces. First thing, I'm gonna do the little thingy-majig over here, turn the dial to Sport Plus, put the gear stock into manual, drop it from third to second, and floor it. Haha. Wow, 354 horsepower. Dives in so well. This suspension is also helping actively keep the car in check. Really narrow, tight roads here. So that's very useful. It's also quite a tricky road, quite dangerous in some senses because there's large drop-offs without any guard. Plus this road is quite popular with bicyclists. So I'm not going to be pushing this beyond a safe limit. That being said though, let's have some fun. Let's turn on the Porsche Sport Response. So now this primes the engine, the suspension, the turbocharger spools up, and for 20 seconds at a time, it gives me the ultimate control and the quickest responses through my throttle inputs. It can get a bit hairy, but wow. Steering is impeccable. It's amazing. It dives in so well. It's incredibly sharp, has a really good weight, not necessarily heavy, even though I always say I personally prefer heavy steering wheels. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. It's just that it's the right amount. It's the adequate amount, and it gets heavier when it needs to. So let's pass this cyclist. There we go. The PDK, of course, very sharp in its response, very quick, very easy to use. The paddle shifters. I mean, Michelle and I filmed that car together and I was laughing the whole time, and this definitely picks up and goes. I mean, holy beep. So in terms of that, I still think that M40i, that 6-cylinder inline petrol engine that the X3 had, still kind of ones up this so far. Let's see how I feel at the end of the drive. And similarly, let's compare it with the GLC. Unfortunately, I haven't driven the 43. I've driven the 63S, and that has the big bi-turbo V8. And in the S, guys, it's also even more powerful. I think it's got over 550 horsepower. So it's not a direct comparison, of course, and certainly not a direct competitor in terms of that either. But you know, because the GLC is a similar car overall, that car feels very different too. The GLC has a more heavy, beastly kind of personality. That V8, of course, makes a huge difference in that it's, do I go right here? Yes, I do. The V8 has a different personality. It's deeper, it's got a more growling sound. It's like a big bull or a wild boar. It's angry, it's loud, it's burbling. Whereas the X3 M40i's straight six, you know, is like a sprinter. It's like a lively sprinter. It's like Usain Bolt, you know? And then the V8 in the GLC is kind of like Vin Diesel. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that. And this is kind of in between. Of course, in the real world, you're not going to be able to drive these cars to their limit. And the more difficult thing for engineers to do and car companies to do is not just add more and more power, but to make the car enjoyable throughout every speed, throughout every road, at whatever, whatever you're doing. It doesn't have to be that, okay, you have a big, fast, heavy car, you only have to drive it really fast and scare yourself before you start enjoying it. No, it's always nicer to have fun at every safe, legal speed. And in that sense, maybe I need to push this car to, further before I feel that. And you can only do it in these short bursts at a time. Let's get that sport response back. Wow, incredible. Braking really hard, brakes in a straight line. Like I mentioned before, the brakes are also upgraded for this car and this facelift. Let's talk about the four-wheel drive system. If I play around with this little dial over here, I can get to this all-wheel drive graphical display. By the way, where's my car on the navigation? There we go. And here I can see now that the car is pretty much splitting the torque 50-50 front and rear. If I put my foot down, then it stays the same, but for example, if the tail kicks out a little bit, then it will send more power to the front. So a little bit of oversteer there. Of course, this car has the PTM, the Porsche Traction Management. So that is also part of the package with the all-wheel drive. In fact, this Macan S will actually have a torque vectoring electromechanical differential with clutch packs instead of just a pure mechanical LSD. Oh man, these roads are incredibly narrow. I don't understand how this is a two-way road, but it's dangerously beautiful. Tires are also revised and provide really good grip. I've never heard one single squeak or squeal or any kind of complaint from them so far. And I've been driving around this island all day. And the chassis, yeah, the new springs are, the newest linkages are great. This air suspension, doing a great job. This is, again, not the Cayenne. It's not a big, heavy car as such. It's still fairly reasonable, 1,800 kilograms. Wow. I went over some bumps, but it seemed like the car anticipated that to some extent. And as soon as it felt that sharpness on one wheel, the other wheels quickly adapted. I could actually feel it softening very momentarily. Impressive. The seats are also doing a great job of holding me in place. We saw how many different settings there are in terms of side bolstering for the base, for the rear and such. But because of that, I can also feel sometimes when I'm going around a corner, I can feel it moving a little bit as well. And of course, cars have this feature. A lot of them do, where depending on your steering input, the bolstering, the sides have like air pockets, and they inflate gradually on the side where you're leaning towards, so it gives more pressure there and kind of pushes your body back. And it's really important because when you're driving quickly, you should never make yourself rigid and try to hold your body in place, because then your footwork gets compromised, your handwork, your steering gets compromised, and you're distracted or constantly being distracted. No. So you should be sitting completely relaxed, and the seat should hold you in place. And this does a great job at that. Okay, so let's see. I think in terms of sporty driving, it's a Porsche. It's hard to fault. Steering is fantastic, really. And the steering wheel, it just harks back to the 911, and you feel like you're driving a sports car. You forget that you're driving a big car at times. It does seem a little bit tricky in tight cities, but on a road like this, it just wraps itself around you, and it just helps you connect so well. Pedal feel, brake feel, really good. Suspension, again, really good. So let's summarize today's episode of the Porsche Macan. The Macan is now available for booking, and the Macan S will be shortly. The prices start at around 60,000 euros for the standard model and can go up to about 84,000 euros starting for the turbo. So the Macan S will be somewhere around that number as well. But there's so many options, like the adaptive LED for cornering, the air suspension, things like that will make this car a little bit almost close to 100, I would say, depending on the model. But overall, I really liked it. I think there's a lot of new technology now, for example, the assistance systems, and the chassis has been updated. Of course, the engine is also really technologically advanced with the inner V twin scroll turbo. It does things like coasting and auto start and auto shut off at traffic lights. By the way, we were getting about 12 liters for 100 kilometers, which is a bit too much, but I didn't really report this because we did not have a really good, a balanced driving time today to really get a realistic number. I would propose that it would be around 9 to 10, which I think is okay. You can see probably numbers even lower if you're just using it on the highway and being very, very careful on the throttle. Things I didn't like, well, there's not many. I think there's some small omissions which I think should have been there, like a light for the sun visor near the vanity mirror and things like switches to topple the seats down. My impressions were pretty good, but I want to know what you guys think. Let me know, put it down in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe and follow us on Facebook and Instagram as well. I'll see you guys next time.